Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
And I am joined by guest Bill
KHJ Los Angeles.
Portions of the day's programming are reproduced by means of electrical transcriptions or tape recordings.
guaranteed to have a better week than the Michigan punter. This is 87 Sports Fans live on LateNightSportsRadio.com. I am Keith Grieve, flying solo, which means, folks, that you will get an abbreviated show. I apologize. This is Keith Grieve here. Last week, the Mets were playing in NLDS. And you'll pardon me if my sports fandom took over, because I didn't want to be distracted. It was bad enough Thursday night when I was producing the Johnny Bobo show. I had to switch out my headphones for the extra long cord so that I could leave the studio, parentheses, studio, to listen to what was going on in the show and watch the game in my living room, standing in the hallway in between. It was quite the sad scene, if you will. But although this is an abbreviated show and you won't get the usual visits from Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com, we are going to talk about something very special today. I had the pleasure of interviewing WBUR 90.9 in Boston and NPR host Bill Littlefield, host of the show Only a Game. And he has a book about the best sports writing, compiling the best sports writing of legendary sports writer W.C. Hines. It is a must read if you are into that sort of thing. If you enjoy where sports writing has come from and some of the best examples of that. And Bill talked to me about how the book came about and what Hines' take would be on some things happening today, in his opinion, and it's a heck of a listen. So here it is. It's a little choppy because I had pre-recorded it with the anticipation of just leading off the show. I didn't do it in a full show, and then plans changed. So the beginning is a little bit cut off, but here's Bill Littlefield about the book, The Top of His Game, the best sports writing of W.C. Hines. Littlefield host game available on NPR and WBUR in Boston 90.9. Bill, welcome to the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Here today to talk about your book, your audio book, the Top of His Game, the best sports writing of W.C. Hines. Tell me the story of this book. How did it come about? Well,
it came about because I've long been an admirer of Bill Hines' writing, and in about 2000, 2001, I got the chance to interview him, and that went so extraordinarily well that I made the opportunity to go visit him in Vermont, where he was living, South Dorset, Vermont. And we hit it off. We became friends, and so he was not only a source of some wonderful radio material for Only a Game, but also we began a correspondence that went on pretty much until he died in 2008. And I also became friends with his daughter, Gail Hines, who, when the Library of America decided to put this book together, suggested that I should edit it and write the introduction, and she told me this is what Dad would have wanted, and that's not the sort of request anybody ever turns down. So it was a great honor to be able to do it, and a lot of fun as well.
So in researching for this interview, I saw a video of a talk that you gave, and you were able to look through his scrapbook, his personal scrapbook of his articles.
Yes, Gail had her dad's scrapbooks, and they were columns pasted into a big couple of big white scrapbooks. And, Jeff McGregor, the wonderful writer who did a great profile of Bill Hines years ago, he got an opportunity to look at the same books and came away saying the incredible thing was there were no bad columns. And he's right. Some of them were spectacularly good, but there certainly were not any that were bad. And to be a columnist and to have that kind of track record was extraordinary. And then, of course, he moved on and wrote wonderful long-form pieces for various magazines and several books, and collaborated on the novel MASH, and just had an exceptional career as a writer.
What was that like, though, flipping through that scrapbook? I have this image in my head of something like out of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they're this glowing spotlight.
Yeah, that's not a bad comparison. There was a lot of fun. First of all, because Bill's writing is so good that you didn't feel like you were delving into dead stories. You felt like you were reading about stuff that was utterly contemporary. And then the second thing that made it fun was Bill had notated some of the columns. So in light pencil, he'd written at the bottom of some of them, good. So I had a kind of a roadmap to which ones should have been in the collection, because he'd pretty much decided which ones he liked best.
Was there any comments that caught you off guard?
Well, not caught me off guard exactly, but I knew him well enough so that reading over the columns, and especially reading his comments at the bottom of some of them, I could hear his voice, and that was very, very exciting. It was compelling. It was great fun, because by that point, of course, he'd been dead for some years, and it was great to be reminded of not only what a wonderful writer he was, but what an extraordinary person.
You've said that you don't think writing was ever easy for Bill. Can you speak to him and his craft and what made him special?
Well, I think one of the things that made him special was his senses. He had a great eye and an even better ear for what people were doing and what they were saying, and he could reproduce what they were doing and saying in such a way that you felt that you knew the people he was writing about as well as he did. But writing really was never easy for him. There's a story about when he was working on The Professional, his novel, and he ran into a fellow who knew him pretty well but hadn't seen him in a year or so. And this fellow took one look at him and he said, "Bill, you look awful. What's the matter? You look terrible." And Bill said, "This is what you look like when you've been trying for a year to write better than you know you can." And I think that was his struggle. He was always trying to write better than he could, and he always said the work is the important thing, and the work that he left behind is exceptional. It's brilliant.
And he's considered a pioneer of the long form, the kind of narrative style. Do you think that could be successful in today's mainstream media with everyone, like the point-and-click society, as I call it?
Yeah. Well, we are in a point-and-click society. You're absolutely right. But there are numbers of websites that feature long-form sports journalism, and as far as I can tell, they're doing pretty well. SB Nation long form that Glenn Stout is in charge of is putting out terrific stuff all the time, and there are others as well. So, the newspapers and the magazines obviously are not nearly as numerous as they were when Bill Hines was writing,
right.
But there are other places where the good long form writing is available.
What do you think his reaction would be to the modern world of the blogosphere, if you will, and the podcast? It seems like everyone's got one, including us.
Yeah, he didn't. Interestingly enough, our correspondence, which lasted from about 2001 to early 2008, late 2007, was all postcards and letters and the occasional phone call. He didn't have a computer, and I don't think he missed it. I think his way was handwriting. But I don't have any idea how he would have handled the current technology, except to say that this was a guy who could turn around a column faster than most people, and in one case, the very famous column "Death of a Racehorse" turned it around on deadline, and a lot of people say it's the best sports column ever written.
Yeah. Well, so I guess maybe I could take that question and spin it a different way. What do you think he would tell a writer who's trying to establish themselves in this world where there's just so many? voices?
What would he tell a writer?
Yeah.
It just, look for the story that maybe you see that nobody else does. Look for the person who's going to be willing and sit down and talk to you, not for the person who's going to be surrounded by an entourage or who's going to be too busy trying to figure out how to work out the best shoe contract or whatever it might be. Go the places where there are people who will actually sit down and see you as an equal and trust you and allow you to trust them. And that's where the great stories came from.
Your take on finding the story within the story. So I'm thinking about the baseball playoffs that we're currently around. And I'm a Mets fan, so life is good. But
yes, so far so good, right?
If you were writing today, I think you would gravitate toward the Cubs, right? They're the most intriguing story. I have this vision of like this beautiful piece of prose about the trials and tribulations of the Cubs.
See, I don't think I can agree. Now, I've been watching some of these playoff games, and I think the story that Bill Hines would pick so far would be Murphy coming around second base, noticing that nobody on the Los Angeles infield has shifted back, that nobody's covering third base, and then waltzing into third base to the great surprise of the third base coach. I think that would be the story that would catch his attention.
and you know what? Now that you say that, you're probably right. And just think about the long litany of trials and tribulations of the Cubs. It's a sad, sad story. So, what's it when we're trying to talk about W.C. Hines and in the grand scheme of things? If you had to, what's your main takeaway from Hines's writing? Is it encapsulated in that time period, something to look at as yesteryear, or do you believe it's timeless and something we should all acquaint ourselves or reacquaint ourselves with?
Well, I think the latter, certainly. Bill not only wrote stuff that was brilliantly conceived and executed. We're still reading stuff written 400 years ago. We're still reading Shakespeare. We're still reading Homer. And there's no reason why good stories, well told, shouldn't be read long after their authors are gone. And I think the other thing that is important, I think, about Bill's legacy is the number of younger writers who saw him as something of a mentor, and he was marvelously generous in his comments and in his communications, his correspondence with writers coming along behind him. So all of that, I think, contributes to a circumstance where somebody should be remembered and somebody whose work should still be valued.
Awesome. Well, one more question before I let you go.
Sure.
And if you don't want to tell it, I understand. But I saw a great video where you told the story of how you got your job. And I was wondering if you could
the Dershowitz story?
Yeah, if you could tell everybody that story.
Yeah, sure. I had been writing for a newspaper called the Boston Ledger, which is one of those papers that if you lived in the right neighborhood or perhaps the wrong neighborhood, they would drop it on your doorstep for free. And I liked public radio. I liked WBUR, so I was reading my columns into a cassette machine and sending cassettes to BUR saying, hey, how come you don't want me to do sports commentary for you? And I never heard anything from them until they suddenly, Alan Dershowitz, very famous and very successful and prominent attorney, appeared on the air doing some sports commentaries. And so I wrote a very smart alecky note to BUR saying, okay, look, if you don't want my stuff, that's entirely your decision, but Alan Dershowitz is an embarrassment as a sports commentator, and you got to get him off the air. And 48 hours later, they basically called me up and said, put up or shut up. And I came in and I gave him two pieces, one on the Boston Marathon and one on opening day at Fenway Park. And they liked them both, and they asked me to record them. And then the news director said, now, when something else important happens in sports in 6 months or so, you be sure to call us again. And I didn't think that was going to amount to anything much, so I called about 2 days later and said, something very important has happened in sports. I better come in right away. And I don't have any idea what that something might have been, but I've been there ever since. That was 1984, so wow. However many years ago that was. And so I owe my entire career to a smart alecky comment that Alan Dershowitz probably didn't deserve.
It's such a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that. So where can everybody get the book, and where can they hear you?
Well, the book is available everywhere fine books are available. I urge people to patronize a independent bookstore near them, but Amazon has it as well. And Only a Game, the show that I host, is on National Public Radio, about 230 stations, something like that. And if your station doesn't carry it, then call them and say, hey, how come you don't carry Only a Game? And the audiobook, if you go to Library of America's website, which is www.loa.org, you'll find the audiobook of The Top of His Game, Best Sports Writing of Bill Hines, and I had a heck of a good time putting that together.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us again. Ladies and gentlemen.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Littlefield, host of Only a Game on WBUR and NPR Radio. We'll be right. All right, folks, there you have it. Nice little talk with Bill Littlefield. Check out the book. And also, that is unfortunately going to do it. If you're wondering what I'm thinking, go Mets. Bring it home. I feel bad for you Cubs fans. You got to face Jacob deGrom with your backs against the wall. Oh, well, though. You'll find a way to get by. For Steve Taylor and Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com in absentia, I am Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com. And we'll be back on the air hopefully next Monday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow, don't catch the Hold 1005 show. And Wednesday night, Jim Sarantias, the Fantasy Greeks NFL Power Hour. Thursday night, Johnny Babbo. Have a good week, everybody.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.